Hey everybody, it's Mick Liubinskas here from Climate Salad. We are recording the Mix podcast. One of the things I love doing is speaking to highly ambitious, incredibly capable climate tech entrepreneurs and founders. And today we're talking about Alchemy Charge and talking to Yasemin. Yasemin, how you going?
I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, good. Can you give us a quick intro? What is Alchemy Charge?
I can. Alchemy Charge. What do we do? So we're a EV charging network. We're based here in Australia. We enable users to have level 1 charging. And I can go into that if you want. So, there's 3 levels of charging, levels 1, 2, and 3. Level 3 is what you see, the fast stuff on the side of the freeway, Sydney to Brisbane in a day. Level 2 is what you see out and about in shopping centres, council car parks, etc. And level 1 is the use of your portable charge cable. What Alchemy Charge has essentially done is monetize the PowerPoint. So you're able to plug into one of what we refer to as a smart point and pay for your usage.
Roughly how long does it take to charge a car? Like if you're like level 1, 2 and 3, like what's the rough details?
Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite questions. And it's probably because it's a slightly different mindset when you drive an electric vehicle. So it's no longer about going to the servo once a week and charging getting a full tank of fuel. It's more about, they refer to it in the industry as ABC, always be charging. It's incidental top-ups. Charging your car is no different to charging your mobile phone. So you primarily charge it on your bedside table overnight, and then when you get in the car in the morning, you plug it in. When you get to work, you plug it in. If we were sitting in a cafe right now and there was a charge pad between us, I guarantee you one of us would have our mobile on it, topping it up. So it's no longer about letting your tank or your battery get to zero. It's about topping up as often as possible. So the average Aussie does 38 kilometres a day, which is only 3 hours of charging via your portable charge cable. And when I say portable charge cable, almost every car in Australia, EV sold in Australia, comes with a portable charger. All you do is plug that into a PowerPoint, just a regular PowerPoint, nothing fancy.
So tell us how all this started.
It was an interesting conversation. So my co-founder, Merrick, also happens to be my husband. He came home one day and he said, it's time to buy an electric vehicle. And I just assumed he wanted a new car and he hadn't really thought it through. So my first question was, how are you going to charge it? And he said, I'm going to charge it from the PowerPoint in the garage. And I almost didn't believe him. I just thought, okay, he's telling me what I want to hear because, this is a big purchase. And it was actually in amongst pandemic. We had just had our now 4-year-old twins. It was in the too hard basket. So I just let it be. And we did exactly that. So we've only ever charged our electric vehicles via our portable charge cable, unless there's been an instance where we've had to do something else. And what ended up happening, so a little bit of background on Merrick and I. Merrick is a remedial builder. And what that means is that he doesn't build things, he fixes things. So concrete structures, that's his forte. He's been in concrete structures, so apartment buildings, for the last 15 years. I've worked with him for the last 10. And what that means is that we have a far too intimate understanding of strata in Australia. So when we're talking, all the different stakeholders, so you've got your landlords, your tenants, your strata managers, your committees, your, everyone under the sun. And then second to that, there's the psychology that goes with living in a strata building, the legislation, the processes, the procedures, and obviously the built environment, which we understand really well. So we kind of thought, okay, this is a great opportunity. We can take, EVs are on the way up. We understand the built environment. We can do EV charging. It was going to be just another strand of our business, our existing remedial building business. We walked into someone who is now one of our competitors, and we were shopping for a charger to install at our Brookvale facility. We were probably a little bit arrogant when we walked in because we were like, we're in industrial downtown Brookvale. We've got access to power. We don't really have a lot of limitations on what we need to feed into to be able to install this curbside charger. So we kind of walked over to the sales exec and said, how much for that one? And he just laughed and he said, don't worry about how much. Talk to me about how much power. And we were like, we've got 300 amp available. And he was like, well, you need 1,000 amp for that. And at which point Merrick kind of piped up and said, well, what can we have then? And they took us over to a small, it was a level 2 charger. So it was a 22 kilowatt charger, not super fast, just, in that very mid-range offering. And we sat back and we were like, we had bigger expectations. And, Merrick being Merrick started questioning. So he was like, so where are you installing these, referring to the bigger ones? And he was like, well, we're not. And what have you got for apartment buildings? Well, that's in the too hard basket. That's, we're not installing into apartment blocks. And we walked out of there and we kind of thought, okay, this is a problem for someone else to solve.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, it was a couple of months later, we had parked the idea altogether, just got on with life. But a couple of months later, I get an SMS from Merrick. I should probably frame that SMS, but it said Monetised PowerPoint. And I was like, what's this guy talking about? He was actually getting a haircut at the time. This man has no peace. He runs a business. We have 4 children. We have a very full life. So, making sense of everything is a bit hard on a good day. But, he sent me that message and I wrote back, well, that's dumb. And here we are, almost 4 years later working on his dumb idea. And it was exactly that. It was, you actually don't need anything more than a PowerPoint to be able to charge your car.
Yeah.
We looked at mature markets. So we looked at the European market, more specifically Norway, and, understood that most of charging takes place where you've got the longer dwell times. So at home or at work. And I think it's like 96% of charging is done at home or at work. And of that 96%, 63% is done by a portable charge cable. And, understanding the limitations to Strata, we knew that we had found a very workable solution.
Wow, amazing. Not the first and last time you're going to get a text message from him like that. But yeah, very glad you decided to jump in and go for it. Where, in terms of what you can share, where are you up to now? And what's 2024? And you've been a part of the Global Growth Program in Climate Salad. And we've got to know you over this year. It's been great to see you expand. But tell us some of that journey, that recent journey.
Yeah, so I guess we've been in market for just over a year now. So it was about 2.5 years of development to get to this point. Growth has been phenomenal. And I say this because, where you start isn't where you end. And that's probably my big takeaway. And understanding that we are a monetized PowerPoint and we talk about EV charging because it's our biggest use case. Being a part of the Global Growth Program, we've always had the global ambitions. And it was actually through the program that we kind of came across the understanding that our offering is instrumental and a game changer in the Strata space. But when you take a step back, in different markets, it means different things to different people. So, when we're talking about Southeast Asia and we're talking about 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers, they don't have the luxury of levels 1, 2, and 3 charging. You can only charge via your portable charge cable. So our solution is the only solution. Suddenly the conversation changes. We were lucky enough to spend some time in Singapore together, Mick, and that was for us game changer. And we had some experiences there that kind of led us to our first international step, which will be at the end of January next year, 2025. We'll be launching a 500 device pilot into Indonesia.
Oh, fantastic. I think one of the biggest reflections on the Global Growth Program is how incredible Australia is at producing innovations and entrepreneurship, but how different we are to the world. Like, there are 26 million people and a massive country. And even though Strata is obviously big in Australia, places like Indonesia with 280 million people and like the size of Victoria, really, like it's just the density of the world and also two-wheelers, like as you said, significantly more two-wheelers in the world, and a really, really big problem. And actually total game changer, right? Because 99% of those journeys are within 10 kilometers. So level 1 charging and just wherever you are, like it's such a different dynamic. And it is a challenge to have this ambition in Australia, be based in Australia, but have this global ambition. and have so many options. Like you could go to Europe because of the regulation and again, lots of two-wheelers and smaller cars and smaller distances. You can go to the US where there's actually a big population, lots of capital, but bigger cars and bigger distances and lots of driving. Everyone drives. Each of the markets represent such different opportunities. Have you tried to process that?
The thing that you have to get your head around is scale. So when we're talking about Australia, and although our solution is very flexible and it has so many different use cases, we've built for Strata. And when we're talking about Strata and apartment blocks, just under 10% of Aussies live in Strata. So it's 2.4 million people live in Strata. And when you flip that on its head, and we're talking about Indonesia, and we're talking about the island of Bali alone, it has a population of 4 million people and a scooter population of 4.5 million. So there's more scooters than people, and the Indonesian government is doing so much in the space of trying to electrify. And the initiatives and the incentives are definitely there. So they're using the carrot and the stick model.
Yeah.
To give you an example, you can, Merrick was in Indonesia a couple of weeks ago. He tells me it was for work, but, cocktails in Bali.
Yeah.
He came back and told me that there's a limitation on how much petrol you can buy at any time. So you can only purchase 10 litres of petrol at a time.
Yeah.
And that's one of the mechanisms they're using to push people into electric vehicles. Two-wheelers, three-wheelers, EVs, the whole lot.
That's really interesting. It's such different dynamics, right? And I think we're right in the middle of it, right? There's no doubt to me that in 2035 we'll look back and all these things will be totally normalized, but we are right in the middle of this messy transition, and it's really complicated but really important. And it's been interesting for me. A lot of people say to me, what's the point of Australia doing anything if Asia's not doing anything? And it's Asia is doing so much more to drive this because they've got huge incentives on the negatives of health and the positives of transition and business opportunity. Yeah, really interesting reflection. So that dynamic is actually, I remember going for a surf trip in Indonesia and seeing people just buying little 2 litres of petrol in little bottles and the dynamic of that change. And you think again of the combination of solar and charging those can be totally game changing in terms of actually helping these developed nations actually provide secure energy and cheaper energy. Democratizing it could be a total game changer. You could literally run your bike for free, once the capital costs are in.
Yeah, that's it. And it's really interesting because I guess they've tried to take the dollars out of the equation. So they've got this incentive where if you've got a petrol scooter, you hand it over to someone, they convert it into an electric scooter, you contribute the equivalent of $100. The government contributes the equivalent of $1,000, and they give you your scooter back as an electric version. And that's 20% of the cost to run on an ongoing basis. So it's a no-brainer.
That is amazing. That is really interesting. And so I've thought about the same thing. I drive a petrol car, but we live really close to buses, and we just don't drive the car enough to warrant upgrading yet, but we really want to. But I thought about getting it upgraded into an EV. But a bike, obviously, is it a simpler? Do you know much about that? Is it simpler or easier, or it's just they're just motivated to do it anyway? I
can't tell you about the technicalities.
Yeah.
That's when Merrick would step in. We're a 2-for-1 deal.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Look, there's some pretty stringent testing around it. So I've heard some of our partners' pain points over there. So when they're talking about conversions and making sure that they pass all the tests, etc. So they've actually, I can say that they're not just releasing it into the wild.
Sure.
They're thinking it through. They're actually taking their time with this transition piece because they want to get it right.
Yeah, interesting. Wow,
and they're learning. They're learning from the markets that have done it before them, right?
Speaking of learnings, what's been the biggest learning this year for the business?
Patience. When you're a startup, where or the type of startup that we are, we're kind of in this climate tech space. We're talking to organizations that we've met through Climate Salad or, other startups or other scale-ups that have the motivation and the energy and the agility to be able to make decisions quickly. And then on the flip side of the coin, you're talking to some really big players, and generally, they're corporate players, and they can make a real impact. So they can click their fingers and make a significant change in our world.
Yeah.
Whether I'm referring to, our little Alchemy Charge world or just, the world in general.
Sure.
And dealing with the larger organizations, I really just think that you have to respect their processes. And as a startup, that can be frustrating.
Yeah, we often talk about impatience for action, but patience for results. So you've got to maintain the hustle, but the hustle doesn't. I think there's an expectation that hustle just brings instant results. And I think you're dealing in some tough worlds, right? Like infrastructure, Strata, the major partners around, like electricity is not something you can muck around with, right? Like you can. It's got to be done really, really seriously. And there's probably benefit of that in there because you've got to really commit to it. But there's also means that you can't just throw you can't just sell them online for everyone to go and throw this in your house, right? Like it's not a $15 toaster. You've got to really do that very seriously. Do you see partnerships as like key to your growth long term?
Absolutely. We actually believe that partnership is our number one method of growth. We're heavily reliant on people taking action, as everyone is, but through partnership, we just feel like it's a win-win. And Merrick and I are old enough and ugly enough, and this isn't our first rodeo. We won't do business unless it's a win-win-win. So it has to be a win for us, a win for our partners or our clients, and a win for Mother Earth because she always wins.
She does. She wins regardless. It's about whether we hang around long enough. I think there's a lot of sense as well that these really, really big companies just don't care and they're not taking any action. In terms of what you've seen in conversations, obviously we'd like to see them take more action. But can you give us a sense of like what's the reality of these big companies? Are they taking this seriously?
Yeah, I mean, my experience is they absolutely are. In some domains, they've been forced to. All the regulation changes, and they've had to take ownership of their supply chains or whatever it is, and that's definitely a motivator. But I also feel like, just on a human personal level, the teams that we've interacted with in these huge organizations, people genuinely care. Like we're yet to hear a hard no. We're yet to hear this is just not a priority, walk away from me.
Yeah.
Because I really do feel like it is. Having said that, is it the highest priority? No.
That's a really good point.
And nor should it be, right? Everyone has to keep their doors open.
Yeah. It's
definitely a consideration, and it's coming up to the top of the priority lists.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay. So, yeah, I think you're right that there's obviously the capitalist push, and if someone's going to lose their job versus making a slightly better decision for the environment, it's unlikely that 99% of the world are going to make that call. But I think there is the discretion and the in the continuum of people's behavior to be like, you know what, I'm recognizing there's a problem here. Like it's I understand climate change and know we're going through it, and I don't feel comfortable doing this, and they'll push a bit harder and they'll try to make that happen. I've seen a lot of business deals die in middle management. So it's like, the CEO might say, we need Alchemy Charge, go and roll it out. And middle management goes, But I feel actually that a lot of middle management are going, you know what, this is a problem. And if I can make this, if this is better for the world and I can do my one positive component, then maybe that's something. So, that's an interesting reflection.
I think the pause that we had, I'm going to call it a pause. It's controversial topic, but with COVID and everyone being locked in their houses and maybe taking a slightly different view or taking a moment to reestablish their views, I think has definitely changed the landscape. this is something that Merrick says all the time. There is enough for everyone. There is so much opportunity out there, and there is so much that needs to be changed and fixed, that partnership and working together is actually the only solution.
I think that's right. I think what is frustrating is that once you recognise there's a problem and you can see a solution, we just want to get it adopted and deployed at scale. And I think the reality of most climate tech is that there are very few things that are simple. Like,
that's it.
You can click the little button and offset your flight, but honestly, that's the simplicity of that is an indication that it's not actually doing the job, right? You're not flying with sustainable aviation fuel because you click that button, or the plastics or the waste, like that. And we've got the same thing of like just buying an EV doesn't solve the problem.
That's right. Charge it from the grid, you're still better off, but the gold standard, the end game is to get the solar on your roof and get that feeding into your car battery, and then using that battery to power your home overnight. Vehicle to grid or vehicle to X is so unbelievably exciting.
I think you're right. It's the other common thing you get from people is like, if it's not perfect, don't do it. And I think that's don't get an EV because it's going to be, it was made by coal-fired power plants and actually it's being charged by coal-fired power plants. Like, that's not a reason not to do it. Like, those things are going to get better too. You need to ratchet up on all fronts. It's it's not like, well, all you need is Alchemy Charge and the whole world's problems, but Alchemy Charge just makes everything a bit better and easier.
Yeah, and horses for courses. And would you want to be charging at an Alchemy Charge smart point on the side of the freeway going from Sydney to Brisbane? Absolutely not. That's where you need your super fast charging. You need your 350 kilowatt fast chargers that are going to get you in and out in 18 minutes,
That's right.
Especially with 4 kids in the back screaming.
Kids in the car, exactly. You've got a high motivational case study right there. Of just like there is...
So motivated.
That is, I think that's, there's so many interesting dynamics of that and second order effects which are changing. Are there other markets around the world? I know Scandinavia been really, really fast moving ahead of the curve in terms of EVs. China, obviously a lot of the cities are really, really moving. Have you seen some of those markets that are on the other side of growth that might help you in terms of thinking about how you roll this out? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, China just takes the cake. They've totally blown everyone else out of the water. All the market data that I see, everyone else on the graph is down here and China is doing these ones, But at the same time, when we look at mature markets, we've spent a lot of time looking at the European markets. So, if we're talking about the UK, we're talking about curbside charging. So they're definitely taking the lead in curbside charging, or taking the initiative with curbside charging, because they're dense urban areas where they cars don't have the luxury of having parking. And, if you take a step back in Australia, 40% of cars are homeless. So, in Australia, we have not as big a problem, but we have a similar conversation. So you really need to take the opportunity to learn what they're doing and then transfer it across.
Yep.
In the 2-wheeler and 3-wheeler space, it's the Southeast Asian markets. We're looking at what they're doing over in India. How can we do it differently? How can we add value? It seems like a lot of our value will come from product quality and safety.
Yeah.
So, where our product, our shell is a Clipsal Schneider shell. We spent 2.5 years selecting this particular shell, not just the shell, obviously it was the entire product development, but, there's very specific reasons why we chose it, safety, the environment, Schneider is an impact-driven organization, what happens at the end of life, recyclability of the products.
Yeah.
And they're considerations that sometimes don't come into other markets.
Mm.
And, and that probably reflects on what you were asking earlier, right? So, yeah, horses for courses.
Horses for courses. Amazing. Like, it's really been, again, incredible to get to know you this year and see the journey the business is on. Tell me about next year. Like, what can you share about the bold plans?
Yeah, next year. So this year's been phenomenal. Out the gates really quick. You know, you can probably see behind me, we've got a couple of accolades to our name, which I love to brag about. But next year is all about growth. So next year is expansion. Next year is getting into the market. I can't quite say yet, but we've got a few plans to shake things up. Next year is all about just that, you know, we've got our range of products. We've embedded everything. We understand our markets. It's all about heads down, bums up, go.
Fantastic. That's amazing. What are the biggest, how do the trends look? I know there's been a lot of conversations this year about EVs, and Australia is a completely different case to the rest of the world, and obviously you're playing in other different markets, and there's light EVs and other things.
Yes.
But what's your sense? I think there's 10 different trends going on. There's the macroeconomic general one.
Yes.
And then there's kind of EVs, which is driving, and then general EV infrastructure policy. Yeah, how are you feeling about which of those are headwinds and tailwinds for next year?
Okay, so next year it looks like a lot of the focus will be around heavy transportation. So, you know, specifically for Australia, that's where it looks like all the government funding is heading. It looks like a lot of the strategy is going down that path. Understanding that there's a lot of those trucks coming into the Australian market, so there's more availability. So I think that's what's the last 2 years have all been about destination charging. Everyone's had this obsession with getting, going long distances, although you only do it once a year, right?
Yeah.
It's all about destination charging. It's all about being able to charge on the side of the road.
Yeah.
A lot of that focus is shifting to, the business side of things, less of the consumer and more into impacting through business.
Yeah, I think I think the timing's good. Like, I think it's been a tough year for climate tech in some degrees because, in terms of capital raising macroeconomically. But if I think about a business like Alchemy Charge, I think the timing is good. I think I reflect on a lot of the companies, like all of your ambition, all of your hard work and hustle. And this goes to the point about being impatient for action, but patience for results. Like, it's impossible for you to change the entire market. Like, you can't be like, well, now here's Alchemy Charge, go and buy an EV. Like, it's not like you have to actually go in lockstep with that. But I think actually that pace and that timing is actually really good. And again, you're not going to 100x, but we don't need to. We just need more proof points, more growth, more partnerships, more deployment, and gearing up, because I think I think by 2035 we're going to be in a whole different world, and in fact I think we're going to see a ton of growth over the next 3 to 5 years. So I think the timing is really, really right. So yeah, very excited.
Yeah, so are we, and I think that you're absolutely right. Had we started this journey 10 years ago, I think we would have burnt out before we had the opportunity to really get out there. I think the timing is right. I think that the market understands where it's heading a little bit better, which means, your average consumer, it's no longer your, early adopters. This is just becoming the norm. Yeah,
I think that's right. I think they're the tipping points I see. We've talked about a few times. Is the regulation is driving the cost of climate negative products higher. Climate tech companies are getting better and better, so their economic value is getting better. So that the green premium is quickly becoming a green profit. Whatever my arms are going. So that's really good. And then you have a lot of the pressures coming. We've mentioned it here as well, like in terms of like individual consumers, employees. Because the middle management, right? It's like, why do we care about rolling out more EV chargers in Strata? Like, because we all, enough of us see those problems now. Board pressure, investor pressure. So I think all these things are really building. And my experience in technology waves has been things happen gradually, then suddenly.
Yeah.
And I think the suddenly is going to happen. 2027 is my bet. So if you're watching this in 2027 and I'm right, reach out, tell me how great I am. If I'm wrong, keep hustling. If I'm late, I'm okay. Sorry, if it was 2026, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
2029 is too late. We need it earlier. But so that's my bold bet for next year.
I'm making a note in my calendar. I'll reach out.
Exactly. I'm expecting a phone call on January 1st, 2028. Actually, 2027. By the end of the year, it'll be fine. And look, it is not your first rodeo. I always think that places a significant amount of pressure on that second rodeo. But in terms of like a climate tech business, how has it differed? Like, I just love the remedial building side. Like, it's just the fact that it even exists, I think is fantastic. But yeah, how's the experience differed from your previous entrepreneurial experiences?
It's wild. And I say that with love. And, remedial building, being in the building game, that whole industry, it's very established. It understands its ways. What we do in the remedial space is probably, it is tech forward and it is climate conscious. And if I can just jump into that, it's about what we do is, here we go, polyurethane injections. So what we can do is we can seal a water crack, a crack in a concrete slab, instead of replacing everything above it. So if you've got a terrace that sits on top of a lounge room, instead of going up into the terrace and taking off the tiles, the screed, the waterproof, and putting it all back down, causing all of that rubbish that goes into landfill, we can go in underneath and at high pressure insert our resin that will, its viscosity is like water, so it'll follow a crack to the hairline, and you've fixed the problem quickly, simply, cheaply. So that's kind of always been our motivator. So that's similar in both the businesses, in both veins. But, going into construction, you go out, you do a quote, someone comes back to you with a work order, you schedule the work, you do the work, you invoice it, done. You can pay your rent and you can pay your school fees.
Yeah.
Alchemy Charge is a little bit different.
Yeah, totally different.
Yeah, totally different. And, when you spend so long developing the product and then you're going out and educating the market and, I don't need to educate anyone on what a water leak is. Everyone understands that problem. But educating someone on understanding the difficulties of installing, super fast charging in an apartment setting, you have to explain the electrical backbone. You have to explain the limitations on power that comes from the grid. You have to explain the amount of, OPEX or CAPEX and OPEX that the Strata committees have to put in on an, initial and ongoing basis. You have to explain how long it takes, the complexity of it all. It's a very different conversation.
Amazing.
Yeah, but nothing's ever lost, right? There's so many lessons that we learned from remedial building transfer straight across to this. And, I say that Alchemy Charge will be our last climate tech startup. But I think deep down inside, I know it won't be.
Merrick's going to get a haircut one day. He's going to text you and say, like, what if on Mars we're doing this? Like, you're like,
yeah.
Sounds good. Let's go to Mars. I think that's definitely going to happen. That's a really good story in there. I'll put that in my calendar for 2035.
Let's see where we're living then. Yeah.
One thing we love to do is encourage people who are passionate about building climate solutions, who've got an idea but might be sort of sitting there wondering, like, how to get going on this. Like, any thoughts of advice, like applying those lessons learned for someone getting started on this journey in building climate tech solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, the highs are high and the lows can be low.
Yeah.
And sometimes those lows can come in thick and fast, but you've got to know your why. You've got to know why you're doing this. And as long as you know why you've set out to make this change, have this impact, develop this idea, build this business, whatever it is, you come back to that. It helps with that, it's a roller coaster. I said it, it's wild. It's so fun. I get to meet people like you and, everyone else that I've gotten quite close to through the Global Growth Program with Climate Salad. And, going to networking events and then meeting someone who will be, they'll come up to you and, this is a very real conversation I've had. They'll say, I don't, as an organization, we don't own petrol stations. Why should we own EV chargers? Like coming up against that wall and making it your ambition to explain to them, this is why I do it. I don't know why you're going to do it, but I'd love to see you on the journey.
It's a really interesting reflection because when I see a fairly public post about something, and there's been a lot around obviously about nuclear and other things, and I'm like, don't read the comments. And I'm like, I read the comments and it's like, oh, I shouldn't have read the comments. And, I don't know whether I'm just lacking the courage to go and, fight that fight and sort of push back. Partly I'm like, I'm not gonna change that person.
Yeah.
My view is if I can spend time with you and helping Alchemy Charge grow, like I don't have to worry about the other person. Like one day they're gonna rock up on holiday somewhere up at Port Macquarie. They're gonna get to the parking space and they're gonna have an EV, even though they said they'd never ever buy one. They got it because it's $400 to fill up your petrol car and $2.50. And they're just gonna scan it and they're gonna go, yeah, that was easy, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And they're never going to go, this is a great climate tech solution that I'm using for the environment. They're like, this just works. And I'm like, just go and make better products. And I think I feel like that's the journey we're on now.
Don't read the comments. That's the answer.
Don't read the comments. Focus on, the beauty again of Climate Salad is everyone there is for climate solutions. Everyone's positive. Everyone's collaborative. And definitely not my first rodeo. I'm so old. I actually run rodeos now. That's how old I am. The positivity I've never experienced before. Right, in other industries, I've had startups who are like, we're almost the same. I hate you, but Climate Salad has a dozen EV charging companies of different kinds, and everyone's helping each other out because we've got a common why, right?
Definitely. And I ran into a Climate Salad member, another EV charging network. They do peer-to-peer. Ivygo, give them a shout out. But I saw them at an event here in Brookvale, and they're actually on the other side of Sydney. And I could walk up to her and I could crack a joke and say, why are you on my turf? We hugged and there's so much love there, and it's actually really wonderful to be a part of.
It is really, really awesome. And look, thanks so much for sharing your journey and experience so far. Looking forward to some incredible growth in 2027. Thanks again for being a valuable member. Again, the one thing we talk about as well is this is the charter of Climate Salad is give before you get. And that this, even though you're part of a program, we expect everyone to contribute, and you've been a really great contributor to that. I want to give a big shout out of thanks to the New South Wales Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water, who've been the ones who supported this New South Wales program and allowed us to operate this with you. Again, thanks again for sharing and all the hard work with Alchemy Charge. Looking forward to a big 2025.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.